In this lecture, we're going to learn how to add HTML to the translation messages. This process poses a potential risk because you put yourself in a position to be vulnerable to XSS injections. I18N comes with a way to minimize the risk of using HTML in your translations by introducing something called component interpolation. The objective of this lecture is to translate the Terms of Service checkbox on the registration form. It's common practice to create a link to the Terms of Service in the form. We want the checkbox to say, "I accept music's Terms of Service." The phrase Terms of Service will have a link wrapped around it. We want to be able to translate this entire string, including the link. First, let's create the translations. Then we'll work on tying everything together. In your editor, open the English locale file. Inside the locale, we'll create a path called register.accept. We're creating a path for messages related to the register component file. The value for it will be "I accept music's Terms of Service." What we essentially want to do is wrap the phrase Terms of Service with anchor tags. This translation will work, but it's the wrong approach. It opens us up to XSS injections. An XSS injection is when malicious HTML content is inserted into the document. For example, a hacker could replace the link with another link. They could redirect the user to a place where it's not safe. If that's the case, what can we do to prevent this? We can create a placeholder like last time. The placeholder can be replaced with the anchor link along with the translated text. To create a placeholder, first we'll need to separate the translation. We're going to create a new path called register.tos. The value for this will be the phrase Terms of Service. Splitting your translations like this may not look right, but it is the safer solution for using HTML with your translations. The next step is to add the placeholder. We'll modify the register.accept message by replacing the text Terms of Service with a placeholder. The placeholder will be called 0. We're not assigning a name as we did before. Despite that, the I18N library will still be able to replace the placeholder. By using numeric values, it'll assume the content you pass along will be used to replace the placeholder. The translations are ready. Let's work on loading it in the component file. Open the register form component file in your editor. In the form element, scroll to the checkbox at the bottom. This element is where we have the checkbox for the Terms of Service. Below the field component, there's a label element with the content we'll want to translate. We're going to change the label element with a component called I18NT. Previously, we would call the $T function to output translations. However, since we're dealing with HTML, we have the option of using the I18NT component. It does the same thing as the $T function. The difference is that you can load in HTML to replace the placeholder if one is available in the translation. First things first, we need to set the translation to use. We'll add the key path property to the component. We'll set it to register.accept. The key path property is the path to the translation the component should output. It's important that we load in the accept translation because that's where we have the placeholder. Next, we're going to set the tag property to label. The I18NT component can wrap translation with some HTML tags. That's another difference between the library's components and functions. We have the ability to wrap our translation with some HTML by setting the tag property. We're telling the component to add label tags because that's what we previously had for the static message. The very last step is to replace the placeholder in the message. The I18NT component will use the component we pass into the component as the replacement for the placeholder. Any HTML or text we put inside the component will replace the placeholder we had in the register.accept path. We'll create an anchor tag that links to nowhere. Inside of it, call the $T function to load in the register.tos translation. The component will replace the placeholder with the content we passed in. Notice that I'm adding the TOS translation before that's done. This is perfectly allowed and how you would create the second part of the translation. As long as you add a placeholder, the component will be able to make the proper replacement. Let's test things out in the browser. Make sure you're logged out before testing the translation. In the register form, the text has been translated. The link won't work because we didn't point it anywhere. That's fine. It's an example to demonstrate how you would combine HTML and translations with component interpolation. If you want to learn more about component interpolation, then check out the link in the resource section of this lecture. It talks more about how you can use its components to translate messages for more advanced use cases.